All right, so plan for today. How do I let the people in? Mid-ball. There we go. All right, so what we're doing here, if y'all don't mind. Thank you. All right, so what we're doing here is we're going to do the last regular lesson in this unit, which is lesson 12, and it is the last lesson in the chapter as well. So it's one of those, they give you an example app and you just make it. And after that, we are going to start the project, not today, next class. Start the project where you build your own app with some specific criteria using one of those, possibly more, but probably not more than one of the provided data sets. But don't worry about that today. Today, we are going to make the random forecaster app. So let's take a look at the example for bubble 1 of this lesson. And so this can go over here, and go like that. All right, so the app, there's only one user interface element, and it is the get forecast button. And when you click on it, it gives you a random city from a list of cities. It gives you all the weather information, expected high temp, low temp, conditions, and a picture that goes along with it. Now, automatically, I didn't even notice before, when you hit run, you don't get a city, which I think is a amateur and super easy problem to fix. But either way, when you look at it, it might not seem that incredible. We've got some numbers, some text, a picture, and we set the properties of all those things. But if we go over to bubble 2, where we can actually look at the data set, which in order for this to work, you are going to need to essentially constantly go back and forth to the table to see what format the data is in. But if we go to it now and go to the daily weather table, data table that's already there, you'll notice that the first date that they have data for is today's date, which is pretty impressive. This table inside of App Lab, side of code.org, is updated every day, which I think is pretty neat. Not all of the tables in App Lab do that. Obviously, if it's depending on whatever for a whole year, it's not going to do that. But for the weather one, if you go to the more info, it will explain how it does it. And the way it does it is with open weather, which is that's free. It's an API, an application program interface, where it's a set of data that's published, and you write program to interpret it and use it in some way. Yeah, there you go. There's an API in action, and we are going to make use of that. So let's go back to look at the code, and they give us, as usual, nothing except the instruction build the app, which I don't know, is a little insulting. They could have just left that blank. We know. And so what are we going to do? Well, we want to, when we click on, or when the user clicks on the forecast button, we want to pick a random city and get all the information from that random city. The thing to notice is that it says the weather tomorrow. So if we look at the data table again, the dates, it has several forecasts for each city. In fact, it has 5 forecasts for each city. And with today being forecast 1 for each city. So that makes tomorrow forecast 2 for each city. And so our goal is to go through the entire list of forecast number with a loop, and any index where there's a 2 in that list, we want to get the state name in the state list, the city name in the city list, the condition if string from the condition list, and so on. And the pictures are just done with strings that are image URLs, and we just do the set image situation, which we all know how to do. So what we're doing, and we've done a lot of this, is filtering lists. We're going to get a list for each of these columns and then do a sort. And wherever that's true, we will add the rest of the information to filtered versions of the list. Since we're not changing the original list, where you could, in theory, go through the full list of states and delete the ones that you don't want, and all the other lists, that would prevent us from accessing the things we deleted. So we are just making other lists, other empty lists that are ready to receive those whatever matches. So let's go ahead and just plug through this. So we need, let's just do some format variables. Let's get rid of this. This is, I don't like that. It's a little insulting. How about event handlers? Event handlers, thank you. And functions. So there's only one user interface element, the button there, and it so we at this point are only going to have one event handler. Now, just like with other ones of these lessons, we've done the example they've given us, and then we've added on some super cool features. We are going to add on a super cool feature, but our first goal is get to the point that they have as an example. So before we can do anything, we need to import all the data. Well, the table's already imported. We need to get column for all the columns that we want. So we need to do that first. And we're going to data table. So the table is only going to be the only table. And let's just go through them and see which ones we want. Okay, so state, let's call this state list. And I know how to spell, I promise. State list. And then next one. Next one, city list. And forecast num. Forecast num list. And we want high, what's the next one? Well, we just work through, we know we need all these things. City, it does a random city, but I want it to output random city, comma, whatever state that city's in. And that's why I got both of those. We need high temp, low temp, condition, and icon. So high temperature, let's call this high temp list. And same thing for low temp list. And the other one is called condition list. is it called condition description. Let's just call it condition list. And we need the icons. And we'll call that icon list. You don't have to name your list ending in the word list or ending in an S, but it does make things easier later on to know what how to treat it. Okay, so like I said before, our goal is to go through this entire forecast num list, and any place that there's a 2, okay, any index where forecast num list has a 2, because that's the tomorrow weather, we want to append, we want to get the state at that same index, the city at that same index, the condition at the same index, and so on. We need a place to put them when we get them. So we need a set of filtered lists. So let's just go filt states empty empty array filt city filt. Now we don't really need to filter the forecast number list. That's what we're using to filter. We're not, once we're done, we're not really interested in what's in that list. We're just using that as our device for picking out the things from the same rows. So we just need filt high temp and filt low temp and filt conditions and filt icons. Also, feel free to adjust the names as you see fit, but you have to be consistent. Filt icon. Filt icon. All right, so we normally would do the filtering inside of a function, but the way it stands, we really just need to do a filtering before the user shows up. So because we're only interested at this point in tomorrow weather, we aren't letting them choose the date. We can go ahead and filter the big lists and populate the filtered lists. So let's just do a loop before, just without any event or without any function definition, just out there. And we want to loop, how many times do we want to loop? Forecast num list dot length or condition list. All these are the same length at this point. Doesn't matter which one we put in. But I think it's easier to remember what's going on if the thing you're filtering is the dot length that you're using. But again, this number is just how many times you're doing the loop. And what are we doing? Well, we are checking. So we need an if. And what are we looking at? Well, we are looking at every item in the forecast num list. So forecast num list index I. Remember, index I, not index 1. That lowercase I looks a lot like a 1. And we are checking to see if whatever item in forecast num list is a 2, because the tomorrow weathers were all listed as a 2 there. And what do we do? What do we want when we get to, why is everything going so slow? Is it running? No, it's not. When we do find a, wow, that's bad. A 2, we want to append whatever is in state list at index I, state list at index I, is going to get appended to filter state. Or filter states, doesn't matter, plural, whatever. Okay. When we find that, we also want whatever is in city list. Did I get city list? I don't know if I did. What is happening here? City list. City list at index I is going into filter city. And we don't need forecast num list. We need high temp list at index I is going into filter high temp. And we need low condition and icon. So whatever's in low temp, the big list at that index is going into filter low temp list. No, I skipped one. Shoot, filter low temp list. I got ahead of myself and punishing myself for it. Okay, and then filter condition list is getting whatever's in condition list. Why is it filter conditions temp? Let me fix that. That's sloppy. Filter conditions gets whatever's in condition list at index I, and filter icon is getting whatever's in icon list at index I. All right, so just for make sure you have the right formatting, well, we're going to do a console log in a second, but the append items are all appending to the filtered lists, and they're appending whatever's in the big list at the index we're checking, which it would only get to this if the in that position in the forecast num list is a 2. And we can check to see if everything is right by, let's just do console.log state list.length. It doesn't matter what's in it. We just want to know how many are there. And console log filter states, or whatever you called it, dot length. So this is the full length or the full list of states. And these are the ones that were on rows where forecast num was a 2. And we're looking for something that is a 5th as big. I messed up. Forecast num list. Forecast num list. Typo. Let's see what happens now. Yeah. Okay. Which works out perfectly. The filtered lists have 1/5 as many items in it as the original, which makes sense because there are 5 forecasts for each city, 1 through 5. At this point, we're only interested in the 2s. Okay, so we have filtered lists populated with all of the data we want. And oh, maybe this is the issue. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so we have a filtered list. We have several filtered lists. We need to pick one index of those filtered lists at random and get whatever's in the filtered state at that position, whatever's in the city, filtered city at that position, all the filtered lists at the same position, and populate the various fields. Now, we could just do it inside of an event handler because that's the only thing that's happening, which is when forecast button is clicked. But we may want to do those things at some other point. And we probably want to do those things right off the bat. So we're going to make an update screen function. And we're going to call it whenever we click on the button. But we're also going to call it right away before the user even gets a chance to do anything, because hopefully when we're done, this will do all the work so that when the user hits run or loads the site, it's as if they hit get forecast, so that it doesn't start out blank the way the example does. All right, so how are we going to do this? Well, we need to pick a random number to serve as the index to get each to get the same thing from each list, the same position. So we need to get a random number. So let's get a need more white space. Get a variable, and local is fine at this point because it's only going to be used inside of here. And how about rand index? And we need to have it pick a random number, just a number that corresponds to a valid index from our filtered list, which we happen to know there's 122 items, so it'd be between 0 and 121, but that's bad form. Better form is between 0 and list.length, which after we're done filtering, all these lists have the same number of items, so it doesn't matter if you do filt city, filt state, whatever, but it is .length -1. The -1 shows up again. Okay, because the last index in any list is one less than however many items there are. So we are picking a number at random, and then with that random number, we're going to set all of the elements at that index, or set all the items on the screen with their list, whatever's at that index that was chosen randomly, so that they all correspond. It's not just choosing a random high and a random low and a random city. It's the high and low from that random city, all based on whatever number this random index shows up. And we can do set text for everything, except the icon needs to be set image. You can do set property and then choose text or image or whatever, but we have these sort of shortcut ones like set text or set image. But let's just go through this. The only one of these four that's going to be a little complicated is city, because I want to do city, state. So it's kind of a little clunky here, but if you look, there is one text area called city output, and then there's another text area called city background. And in order to get it to work with city, state, you either need to shrink the text a couple or do a new line thing. I'll show you both ways. It's not very hard. So we want to, come on, computer. There we go. We want to set the text of city output to, we want to combine the train cars, whatever's in the filtered city list at index rand index, followed by a comma, but in quotes, so open quotes, comma, space, close quote, followed by whatever's in filtered states at index rand index. Okay, and this actually should work. What's happening? Is it just going slow? No, I did something wrong. Rand index. We're getting a city, but we're always getting Anchorage, Alaska. Filt states, alien. Oh, it helps to spell things right. Alien GTH. And there we go. Random city, random state. You can see right away that the long ones don't fit. The easier solution to this is, and it's not even all of them. It's actually very few. The easiest way to change this is to go to that text area and shrink the text by a couple. That should do it. The other way is to do a new line command, which we'll call this a style choice. If we wanted a new line between city and state, we would put it inside the quotes \n. So now the state will always show up on a new line. And it's still a little tight there. I would just go in and make that text area a little bigger, which could have solved our issue in the first place. There we go. Okay, so that really is the only hard one of the different set texts. The rest are pretty basic. We just want a set text. We want to set the high temp output to whatever's in filtered high temp at index rand index. And we want to set the low temp output to whatever's in filtered low temp at rand index. And this actually should work also at this point, hopefully. There we go. And we want to set the text of conditions output. So it is conditions output. We want to set it to filter conditions, rand index, right, index, rand index. And the last one, we need to use set image URL of icon output, which in the set image URL, there's only one element right now that can receive it, is that. And we want to set it to whatever's in filtered icons. You get rid of the string, filtered icons at index rand index. And there you go. That is the expectation of the example, I think. Okay. We are going to add a super cool feature. We are going to let the user choose which of the 5 dates. Instead of always just doing the tomorrow weather, the one at index or where filter num-list is 2, we're going to give them a drop down with each of the 5 dates. So first thing we need to do is give them a drop down. And well, we need some design method stuff. Let's go ahead into design and well, we can get rid of the word tomorrow. This is obviously pointless because it doesn't really matter what it says, but it's no longer a tomorrow forecast. It is a drop down situation. So I'm going to give it some space, like that. And let's just call it date drop down. And so the slow and lame way to do it would be to put in dates like this. The reason why it's lame is because these dates are going to be the same when you open up tomorrow and the next day. What we can do is populate that drop down in the code with what we want it to happen, what we want to be there, so that when the table updates, it will be the updated dates as well. I think is a drastic improvement. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's look at the data table. Well, first we're going to need the date list, no matter what, or the date column. So let's just do date lists. And the column we want is date. And we don't actually need a filtered date because it, just like before with the forecast num, it's the thing we're filtering by. Yeah, it's the thing we're filtering by. So this is, let me get some more white space. So at some point after we declare some variables before we filter. In fact, this can go most places. So the way that this dynamically populating the options in a dropdown works is with set property. Choose the element you want to set the property of, which is date dropdown. We want to set its options to a list of options. Now, if we just did the options of date list, which is our list of dates, and hit run, the drop-down list is going to be 600 dates long, and obviously repeats. We don't need every item in the date list. We just need whatever's in the first 5 positions, because the first 5 for Anchorage are the same 5 for Fairbanks and so on. So we need to make a list that is only going to have the first 5 items in the date list, and then use that list as the way that we update our dropdown. So it's a little intermediate step, but it saves a lot of work. So before we set the property, we need to, we're essentially filtering the date list. Let's, of course, if we're filtering, we need something to put there. Let's call it, I don't know, first 5 dates, and it's going to be an empty string. And anytime we're sorting, we need to loop. And we are looping 5 times. We only want to go through the date list 5 times. And every time we go through it, of those 5 times, we are going to append to our temporary list whatever is in date list at index I. And when we're done, we will have a date list that has 5 dates in it, the first 5 dates on the date list. And when it populates, it will give us, oh no, hold on, not date list. We want to set it to first 5 dates. The list we want to use to populate is that. Okay, so every day when the chart updates, it will have today's date and the next 4 dates as the options. Okay, so that's great. I think that is a cool trick right away that you can take with you. But what are we doing now? Well, we're filtering, but we're no longer filtering just by numList2. We're actually filtering by whatever they got as, whatever they've chosen as a dropdown. So our filtering is, instead of forecast list, well, we're going through all of them. So this is one of the main lists. It doesn't matter which one we do. We are asking if whatever is in date list at index I is the thing that they chose. So we can just get property, or not, get text of date dropdown. So the get text of date dropdown is going to be whatever one they chose, and the date list at index I is going to be, instead of forecast numList 2, it's going to be the full date list. And because we used the date list format, even though date is a string here, because we used its own format to populate the dropdown, we can compare it against it exactly. And that solves actually a ton of problems. But new problem. New problem is we don't want to do the filtering at the beginning, or it's fine if we do the filtering at the beginning, but we need to do the filtering constantly, or every time they choose a new date, as well as every time they choose a new forecast. So where are we going to do that? Well, we are going to do that in the update screen, because that happens every time anything happens. So we can put our entire loop, our entire filtering loop, inside of the update screen, and it got all sloppy there. Let me move this around. And okay, so we are updating our filtered lists whenever, let's see here, does this work? Okay, get fair. Okay, so it still works, but it's not going to change when we change this. The reason why it's not going to change is because we are doing a filter multiple times throughout this app. Every time they change the dropdown, anytime you're filtering, doing multiple filters, you have to clear out those lists before you add things to them again. So these blank lists, we can copy those, not move those. They still need to be global. Move those into here, and then get rid of all the vars. We are reestablishing these filtered lists as empty lists. We are wiping them clean by assigning them an empty string. Okay, and let's, so think about how we would use this. We have our list of dates. When we change the date, nothing happens. So we need an event handler for that. So let's add an event handler when date dropdown is clicked. We want to run update screen, just like the other one. And so now we hit run, and we click on new forecast. We get a new city, it populates, great. We click on a new date, and it changes the city also. That is clearly not the user experience we're looking for. You would think a user would find the city and then want to be able to change the dates for that city and look at other ones in the city. So we aren't going to change. We need to stop changing the random index inside the update screen, because update screen is called no matter what. We only want to change the random index when they click on the forecast button. Okay, but in order to use, because random index is now being created or changed, or used with the button, and it's still being used with all our set text and stuff, it needs to be a global variable. And you can see here, it says hasn't been declared yet, even though it's right here. So what we really need to do is declare it and give it a random one to start the app. And then also every time they click forecast, do another random one, but not with a var. And we are getting darn close at this point. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, pick a random city, change the date. Okay, if this works, it should still be El Paso, but different temperatures. Hey, there we go. I don't know why it's going so slow. And there's one more thing I'd like to add. It's a very minor thing. And that is, okay, so let's say you're looking at multiple dates for Denver/Boulder. Okay, we click on Friday, we get Sunday. When you click a new city, I think the date should go back to today's date. It doesn't. It stays on whatever it is. So how can you do that? Well, there is a set property for any dropdown called index. And when do we want that? We want that to happen. Let's just do it at the end of update screen so it doesn't mess with anything. So we'll do a set property. we want to set the property of date dropdown. We want to set its index because the dropdown list is just like a list. The first item in the list is index 0. So if we set it to index 0 every time we call update screen, which we call update screen all the time. Okay, so making sure it still works. New city still works. New date still works for the same city. But if I click on, did it do that? Oh, no, I don't want it to do it every time because that's not what I want it to do. I only want it to do when we click on the button, my mistake. So let's do our set property up with a button. Wow, this is slow. Okay, so with the button, and when the button is clicked, we run update screen, which will handle whatever's there, but we set the drop down back to its first position. So, okay, new city, there you go. New city still works. For one city, it will change the temperature or the date for it. And when I click new city or get forecast, this drop down should go back to the 22nd. And it does. Okay, ta-da. And I think that's it. I know that's a lot, and we kind of flew through it. And actually a fair amount of new stuff, like set property stuff and dynamically updating the options in a list, which I think you'll agree is an improvement. I'll scroll through this slowly so you can at least grab it from the video. I'll clean it up a little bit. No, that's not what I want. Just thinking about process, there's things that we want to happen before the user gets there so that they're not in, we need to make sure they aren't in inside of functions or event handlers. They're just called right away. And we know we need a rand index in order to call update screen. So we have to call it before we call update screen, even though both those are happening before. It shouldn't work this time. Yeah, it doesn't work because update screen is looking for stuff at rand index, which doesn't exist. And we are only getting a new random one when we click on forecast button. So that's another reason why it can't be in the update screen function. The update screen function is only things we want to happen whenever we call it. And looping through, clearing out lists, and then repopulate them with whatever we want to populate it with, and then updating the actual elements on the screen. That's it. All right, let me know if you have any questions. What's up?